We're short 3.
Materials were
Dr. John
good.
and Les.
That was fortunate.
Oh, absolutely.
Or we'd had to make a lot more concessions.
Unless was going to be here.
I knew he wasn't going to be here,
Okay.
so I didn't put his name on.
Okay. So we're expecting those.
I think Dr. Brownfield isn't going to be here. I think he emailed Lisa today.
Dave.
Dave. I haven't heard anything from Dave.
And Les
The
is
attorney should be jumping on Zoom if he's not already on.
Do we wait for him before we start?
Oh, they're on. Okay. The attorney is on.
Do we get to see him at all?
I don't think so.
Oh.
I think we're working on the bugs. I think eventually we'll be able to see him on these monitors here.
Okay.
But we're, there you go. Oh, there we go.
I will just maybe test my audio. Members of the commission, Robert Scott here. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
We can.
Okay, and I also have Kara Brown in my office who's just going to be observing in case she needs to attend a meeting like this in the future.
Right. Perfect.
All right. We'll call the meeting to order. This is the May 18th City Charter Commission meeting. First of all, we're looking for an approval of the minutes from the April 20th meeting. Anybody have any comments on those?
They look good to me. I move to approve those.
Motion, do we have a second? Motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. So minutes are approved. Looks like the first 3 items in old business are just formal approval of the language that we've already talked about at the previous meeting. So under item 3.1, first of all, revisions to section 4.22.22. Is there any discussion on the language that we have in our agenda? If not, is there a motion to formally approve that?
I would move to approve the recommendation to revise section 22 of the charter to match the language in.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? If not, all in favor of that change signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. So item 3.2 is again, this was the anti-nepotism section of the charter. Any discussion about the formal language on that one? If not, do we have a motion to approve it?
I move to approve section 24 as written.
Is there a second?
Second.
We had a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor of that change signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. And then item 3.3, this is the Charter section 114 and 115 revisions. Any discussion on that language? This was just that quick date of change for the initial consideration of the budget. Anybody care to offer a motion to approve it?
I'll move to approve the changes to section 114 and 115 as written.
We have a motion. Do we have a second on that?
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None? All right, so that was the easy stuff. Now, section 3.4, discussion we've had in the past couple of meetings about should the city charter contain a code of ethics in it. And I don't know if our city attorney has had a chance to look at that any further or has anything to add to the previous discussion. Mr. Scott, are you there?
I am. Thank you, Chair. I have looked through the material that was in your packet. It appears that there's been some research conducted on cities that have ethic codes or authorize councils to enact their own ethic codes in their charters. I guess I wasn't entirely sure on the status of this matter coming before the commission. I think at this point I reviewed the examples. I think those are all viable examples for the commission to look to if the commission is interested in including something like that in New Ulm's charter. But I had not prepared I've not identified a favorite or one that I'd recommend you focus on. I don't know, do you have specific questions on any of your previous discussions or anything that was in your packet tonight?
Maybe we'll just open it up for discussion of the commission. Anybody take a look at any of those examples we have and have preferences for one or the other?
I looked through it, and I do like the Duluth conflict of interest section in what they have, and that it is both public officials as well as delineates commissioners as well. And I think that's important that both are addressed. The only change I would have is that all of the pronouns are male, and that we would update it to reflect what the rest of our charter has.
I also looked at that one and thought it was good. One thing I did note on a couple of other examples was this one is confined to public official. Some of the others extended it to department heads and city manager and city attorney. I don't know how commission feels about that, whether we want to just leave it with city official or how we want to word that section. I think another question it raised in my mind is it reads they are required to take an action or make a decision which would substantially affect their financial interests. I wonder if there's other interests besides financial that we want to talk about here. Be it, I don't know, personal or relationship interests. I'm not sure how I would word that, but is it simply financial interests that are of concern?
Well, I mean, there certainly can be others. You know, if your spouse is belongs to a particular church, and there's something about coming up about the church or the property that in my case, my wife would be a church elder or something like that. Should I disclose that? I mean, you have a judge, and I know you've had some things that you've had no financial interest in, but just because of how that might parlay in that arena.
So I think we're kind of need to think about it in terms of what is absolutely prohibited behavior and what is appropriate, necessary, what is helpful, right? So we had a PUC issue once regarding some members of the commission were also on the economic right. Yeah. And technically that was not considered a conflict of interest because the commissioner's role on the other committee, it was maybe something that they were interested in and had feelings for and had background related to, but there wasn't any personal financial gain that was going to result as, So, I mean, I think what we're talking about a specific rule here, we're talking about the kinds of things that need to be absolutely prohibited. Now, as a elected official, if you have a bias towards one thing and it's not maybe technically a conflict of interest, the electorate may not be happy with you if you're always siding one way or the other, but that might be the more appropriate way to deal with it. In my world, that's kind of the issue of conflict of interest becomes kind of people kind of understand it kind of colloquially, like you already like this person, so you couldn't possibly work on my case, or, it really comes down to trying to define specifically what is the reason that your decision might, gosh, I can't think of the right term to describe it, but I feel like limiting it to a financial is probably important. Otherwise, we're going to be so broad,
Could be, yeah.
We're making a decision about your neighbor, so you as a city councilor have to abstain. Well, that's
Right.
going to happen all the time.
So is it something that the charter gives some authority to the council to make those decisions? If there's a counselor that maybe the 4 of the counselors feel a certain way about one counselor, can they have the authority to say, you have to step back from it? I mean, you can't possibly cover everything. A couple of these cities have tried, but I guarantee we can find more cases that they have not covered. You can't cover it all.
And it seems like some of the examples did that, didn't they? They said, council, you have the right to question behavior of your members and to call them out for it.
And I think one suggested that if a counselor felt they had a conflict, that they'd excuse themselves from the council part and become part of the public part, maybe for information or whatever. But, we've all been on enough boards, and, you hope that everybody just does the right thing, that when you know you've got a conflict, you just abstain. I just don't know how you cover everything.
And just for reference, when I go through the agenda, if I feel there's some type of conflict with a counselor, I reach out to them and say, hey, I think there's a potential conflict, and then wait for their response, and then usually send that over to the city attorney to get clarification. But lately, the counselors have been pretty good of recusing themselves from things, or researching on their own to make sure they don't have conflict. But I do try and catch that when we do the agendas if I feel there's something. And then
I agree with Linda that, the obvious one is financial.
Yeah.
To me.
Yep.
So you make that the hard and fast rule in the charter, and then some language that basically gives the council authority to make those decisions, or with the city manager, however, with staff.
And then to the question, in our personnel policy, it does have conflict of interest for city employees already in there that we sign when we're hired.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I can offer a couple comments here just based on the discussion too.
Please.
That's appropriate. I would agree with the comment that it will be impossible to define every circumstance that would be a conflict of interest in the charter, or the council would not be able to do it in advance. Having advised councils and staff on conflict of interest questions, I know they are just inherently fact specific. And I would also agree with the comment that, a lot of times it is easy to establish a kind of bright line. There's a conflict if a member has a financial interest in the decision, if a council member does, if for that matter, a staff member. That's easy enough to determine as you look at the members' bank account going to be affected by the outcome of the decision that's before them. And that's why a lot of the charters deal specifically with financial conflicts of interest, because that is something that is more or less capable of determining, and that is susceptible to establishing a kind of bright line rule. And to be honest, the statutes and case law have already established that even if your charter didn't, council members would still be bound by it, which is not to say it shouldn't be in the charter. But the other category, though, when we're talking about non-financial conflicts of interest, do those exist? Of course they do. It's kind of encompassed in this concept of an official having a bias. An official has a bias if the official has some sort of relationship to the matter coming before the body that makes it impossible or makes it so that the official can't be trusted to be exercising judgment on behalf of the public because it's so personal to the official. And that could be due to familial relations. It could be due to just expressed interests of that official. One that comes up sometimes would be if the body is asked to make a quasi judicial decision, like on a land use permit or something. And a member has been already, before the matter comes to the body, affiliated with a group that's opposing the project for whatever reason. That would present a conflict in that case because you can't trust that member then to receive the information on the body and exercise independent judgment. So I guess I kind of separate them into two categories of conflicts. There's the financial interest, which yes, does seem to be capable of a kind of a bright line principle that you could easily incorporate in your charter. And then there's this fuzzier category where it kind of comes under the label of bias that still could present a situation where a member should not vote and legally would be disqualified from voting if the right circumstances are present, but you'll never be able to detail in advance of the situation arising.
All right, thank you. How is everybody feeling about the Duluth example? Are we at the point where we could maybe direct the city attorney to put that together as a formal section for us to consider? Or any other thoughts on where we should go with this?
I'm ready to move forward.
Okay. Can you put that in the form of a motion?
No. I move that we ask the attorney to create verbiage similar to what Duluth has for the conflict of interest and bring it before us for approval.
Is there a second to that motion?
A second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Further discussion. Mr. Jensen, would you like to include any provisions that would allow the council to call out a member that they feel is acting inappropriately or not?
I guess if we've got it Chris said we have that already stated in the manual or whatever, I'm satisfied with that.
Okay. Any further discussion? Mr. Scott, would that give you sufficient information to prepare a section for us?
Yes, it would, Chair. Thank you.
All right. All right. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, and then moving on to new business. First of all, under 4.1, we've got a memo from the previous city attorney. I think that as I recall, there had been some discussion about whether a misdemeanor could be grounds for removal from the council. And I think it was specifically crimes of violence. And apparently from my understanding of Roger's memo is you can't use a misdemeanor as a reason for dismissal. Is that the way you read it?
That's what
Linda?
I'm interpreting.
Okay. So I don't know if any action is necessary on that item or not. It doesn't sound like it.
The only motion I would look is just to not move forward with that,
Okay.
pursuing that so we know.
Okay.
Take it off the agenda.
All right. Anybody willing to offer a motion like that?
So I would move that we not recommend amendment to section 32.
Okay, we have a motion, and is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion on that item? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. And the last new business item is the charter amendment, which, as I read it, would take out the language in the present charter, which requires a waiver of the reading of the resolution by the council. Does anybody have any further information on where that came from, or who put it together?
I think that was Counselor Schultz had requested to take a look at that, and it would be basically when a resolution comes, instead of us, the counselors always having to make the motion to offer a resolution and waive the reading, they can just offer the resolution because it will be present in the packet.
Okay. I always thought that was kind of cumbersome. This is the only council I've ever seen that has to do that.
Okay.
Any other discussion about that revision? If not, does somebody want to offer a motion to approve it?
I'll offer a motion to approve the changes to section 68.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any other discussion about that item? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? We've got that one taken care of. I suppose with this added language on the ethics section, we're going to have to schedule another meeting, but I'm not sure that we have one set right now, right? It was just
No.
this meeting.
We'll send a doodle pull out for the next meeting. And then one other thing is because the council approved yesterday to the new fire code through Lexipol, I'm going to make sure the fire sections in the charter match up to what Lexipol is there. So there may be a couple new things under new business, but I think they're fairly consistent, but I'm going to double check just to make sure what we currently have for fire regulations match what's in the charter.
Okay, very good. Any other announcements or information anybody wants to bring forward? If not, in record time, we are adjourned. Good job.